what we've done in the past has led us to who we are now, and that's who Karen is now. A wonderful medium, healer, teacher, and that's how we know her mostly. But she's also a best-selling published author for her new book, Till Death Don't Us Part. Prior to that, Karen was a war correspondent. She has published another book, which is called, let me get this right, Karen. I had that down. You can help me with it if you can.
The Other Irish?
Yes. Yes, thank you. And also, which really most of us, I don't think, really did know, she produced 2 documentaries with Deepak Chopra, and also wrote and produced a documentary series called Made in America, which received an Irish Film and Television Award for Best Documentary Series. So all of these things in her background, and then, you know, through her own experience, which she writes about in her book, has come into this world of the spirit. And through Arthur Findlay College, through working with Spiritualist National Union, she also holds 3 certificates of recognition in her mediumship, in spiritual healing, and public speaking. And now she's currently a PhD candidate. So there's a lot going on for Karen, and we're so happy that she's had the time to come back today to join with us. So with that said, Karen, we're going to turn it over to you for your talk today.
Interestingly, as often happens in these services, the talk, the song, and the reading the song and what I wanted to talk about actually are all on a theme. The Other Irish, as you mentioned, was a book that I wrote as part of the Northern Ireland peace process. It was a cultural outreach, and so it was supported by the government as part of the peace process in Northern Ireland, which actually kind of leads me into what I got to thinking about for today's talk. And it's coming on the heels of the "don't talk about politics in America" situation. You know, as an outsider, I mean, I've been here for many, many years, but as an outsider, what I noticed in the last few weeks, few months, especially the last few weeks, is unbelievable. I know you've all experienced this, unbelievable division and hostility, and I might even say hatred of one American for another. And I have to be honest, the only time I have ever seen anything that intense was in Belfast at the height of the Troubles in the 80s, before the peace process, and in Baghdad. 2 war zones was the only time I've seen what went on in this country for the last couple of weeks. Now, I'll speak about Belfast because I grew up, as you know, in Ireland. And what used to happen was the IRA would plant a bomb and kill people, and the loyalists would go retaliate with another one, kill more people. And this went on back and forth like this never-ending cycle. And in 1987, the IRA planted a bomb that killed quite a few people. And one person in that explosion was a man called, a draper called Gordon Wilson. And he and his daughter were both in the explosion. His daughter died. His daughter was killed, and she died holding her father's hand. And I remember these explosions, and I remember the backlash from them. But that night, Gordon Wilson went on the BBC, and instead of calling for retaliation, he said, "I bear no will, I bear no grudge." And nobody had ever heard anything like this in Northern Ireland before. And an historian later said that no words in more than 25 years of violence in Northern Ireland had such a powerful emotional impact. 10 years later, the peace process, the peace accords were signed in Northern Ireland. Did it make all of the animosity and hate go away? No, of course not. There's still vast differences there, but nothing as violent and as intense as it was in the 80s. And here we are in America. Americans and Americans. In Northern Ireland, it was, you know, different peoples. In Baghdad, it's different peoples, Sunni and Shia, different peoples. In America, it's just Americans. It's amazing to me. Now, what Gordon Wilson showed us is the power of forgiveness. You know, we have listened to the president-elect now calling for unity, you know, calling for an end to these divisions, calling for an end to all of the hate and animosity. And I think to myself, after what we've seen in the last few weeks, how on earth is that going to happen? And I think that Gordon Wilson is one person who shows us how that can be. It happens through forgiveness. And that's not easy. I mean, forgiveness is not for the faint-hearted. You, at some point, somebody has to stand up and say, I will accept the suffering, I will accept the way things are, I will bear this, and I will not retaliate. I will not keep passing this along to the next generation. I mean, without that, we're just perpetuating suffering. We're just chained to suffering. So why would we choose that? Why would we choose not to forgive? Because it's a really hard thing to do. And it is notoriously misunderstood. Now, even on a personal level, not even on the national level, on a personal level, we've all at some stage in our lives been hurt. You know, perhaps growing up, we were criticized our whole time, teachers, parents, perhaps a friend we trusted got us fired from our job, perhaps another friend cheated, our spouse cheated on us. At some point in time, we have all been hurt. Some of us have experienced traumatic experiences, physical or mental abuse. And these experiences can leave us with very lasting feelings of anger and bitterness and vengeance. And then somebody comes along and they said, okay, now you've got to forgive all of those people who did atrocious things to you, right? And you go, are you out of your mind? I will never forgive them for what they've done. I will never forgive them for what they believe. I will never forgive them for what they've subjected me to. Why would I want to do that? Well, we know that harboring that kind of anger and resentment causes our own bodies to release stress hormones. So we're in a perpetual state of pumping out cortisol and adrenaline whenever that person or that ideology comes to mind. It's like what Socrates said. It's like drinking poison and wanting the other fella to die. See, it doesn't just do harm to our bodies. It steals our joy. It separates us from any feelings of compassion and loving kindness. And when we're separated from that, we're separated from our true nature. Bit of a quandary. So what do we do? Well, I started when I was thinking about this yesterday, I started thinking, you know, what does forgiveness mean and how do we forgive? And, you know, I was thinking, well, in the Bible, we're told just turn the other cheek. Oh yeah, that's going to happen in America. That's going to happen anywhere. That's not going to happen in the Middle East. And that's not going to happen anywhere. Turn the other cheek never works. I think it would take God himself to be able to do that. We're also told, oh, forgive and forget. And again, we'll say, are you kidding? I will never forget what they did. But the truth is forgiveness is not about forgetting. And that's where it gets tricky. So I looked up, how do people define forgiveness? And what I found was psychologists define it as the deliberate decision to release feelings of resentment or vengeance towards a person or group who has harmed you, regardless of whether they actually deserve your forgiveness, even if they don't apologize or take responsibility or make amends. That's a tough nut. Buddhist teacher Jack Kornfield said that forgiveness does not mean that we condone what happened in the past. It's not forgive and forget. It's a decision to release the suffering the burdens of the pains and betrayals of the past, and instead choose love. And it can include the resolve to protect yourself and never let this happen again. So all this means forgiveness is possible, even if reconciliation isn't. And after reading all of this, I still didn't know what to do. And then the Lakota Sioux said, forgiveness is giving up all hope of a better past. And that started to help me make sense of what forgiveness meant. And I read Dr. Fred Luskin. I actually watched one of his YouTube movies. He's a Stanford University professor, and he is a pioneer in the practice and science of forgiveness. And he said that, and this was interesting, because it was so difficult, how do we get at forgiveness? We can say it. It sounds lovely. It sounds, I forgive you. But in practice, what does it do? Because it's hard work. The work of forgiveness is hard work. And Fred Luskin said, and he said that it's really about making peace with the past and the present. He said, it's the ability to make peace with the word no. So for instance, it's seeing events, we see events as something that not as we wanted, right? Events happened not as we wanted them to happen, they happened some other way. So we got to know for what we wanted. We need to make peace with that. We might have got, if the partner cheated, that's a no. You wanted them to be faithful, they said no, they cheated. We wanted to be loved as a child, we weren't. We were said no, it was not the way we wanted it to be. We often get vengeful and want to seek vengeance on people who have done us harm by making what is not what we wanted it to be. And I realized that forgiveness begins with making peace with what is, by just accepting what is, by forgetting and giving up the hope of a better past, to have a better moment in the future. And we find this peace by recognizing that something that happened didn't happen the way we wanted it to happen, and that hurts. And that's fine. And for that, we need to grieve. And we need to understand when we have grieved that while we can't change what happened, we can certainly change our emotional response to it. And once we begin to accept what is, once we begin to release our hope for a better past, we make the space to give the next moment a chance. And the other thing I realized that can help too is that as spiritual beings, we can practice empathy. Now I know saying have empathy for somebody who wronged you is a big step. What if we start seeing just for a moment, just to see what happened from their perspective, from their point of view. And I'm not saying this as a way to justify or excuse their behavior. I'm saying this as a way perhaps to understand that their actions weren't actually about us at all. I mean, how many times over recent weeks have we heard one person say, how could they vote for him? And the other person say, how could they vote for him? How could you create a reality that is not what I wanted? Right, and then we're angry at them. But maybe people are we are all the time driven by fear, driven by survival. That's a basic human instinct. Sometimes we are driven by ignorance. We are not fully informed. Sometimes we are driven by expectations. What we believe will happen if so-and-so is in power. What we believe will be an encroachment on our rights and our freedoms if so-and-so gets into power, regardless. Comes on both sides. On the personal level, we really need to reflect on whether somebody else's actions were acts against us, whether there was malicious intent that was personal to us, or whether it was driven by circumstances in their life, by hurts and wounds and disorders in their life. See, hurt people hurt. Happy people don't hurt. So if someone hurts us, they're hurt. And I don't say this to seek to justify their behavior, but to seek to understand their behavior. Like in the 12-step program, they say, you know, always the first thing is take care of your own side of the street. Make sure you understand what belongs to their side of the street. And that takes this personal sting out of these actions. We begin to understand what's happened here is about them, their issue, not about us. Does not reflect on our self-worth. And being victimized by that or being hurt by that does not have to be part of our identity, no matter when the hurt happened or what it was or how often. See, that empowers us to recognize that the pain that we suffered happened without letting that pain define who we are. Because we have to remember too, if we are hurt, we will hurt. And that we have a responsibility, not only to ourselves, but to the future moment, for the moment yet to come, not to pass that hurt along. So we can release the control and the power that we have given to the person who hurt us. Because that happens, we hold on to this hurt, we define ourselves, begin to incorporate it into our being, and that gives an inordinate amount of power to that perpetrator, to that person we deem has hurt us. But when we realize that once we accept and make peace with what is in the present, give up hope of a better past, make peace with what it is in the present, and realize and understand, even if we don't have to accept, we don't have to control, and we certainly don't have to reconcile. Forgiveness is an inside job. It does not mean reconciling. That is a choice. Forgiveness is a choice, even if reconciliation isn't. But what it does is it gives us more power. And when we have more power, we feel less victimized. We can feel less hurt. We know that we have the power to choose, to understand, to see what their role is, and to make peace with what is. And only we have the power to make that choice. The other issue also is the Dalai Lama talking about making peace with what is when things don't turn out to be the way you wanted them. The Dalai Lama, and all of the Tibetan monks were all, as you know, exiled from Tibet by the Chinese. They lost all their monasteries, all their teachings, all of everything they lost, and had to take refuge in India. And the Dalai Lama was asked, how do you deal with this? How are you not angry about this? And the Dalai Lama said, they have taken everything from me, but they will not take my joy. And this again is why forgiveness is so important, because without forgiveness, we can have no joy. And there was a story of two ex-prisoners of war. And one said to the other, have you forgiven your captors yet? And the second one said, no, never. And the first one said, well, then they still have you in prison, don't they? And this is why it's important to remember that what's done to us, no matter what happens, no matter what we've seen around us, is forgivable. There is no act that is not forgivable. And it's because forgiveness is our choice. We can always choose. That's our power. And this is why everything is forgivable, because it is not condoning, justifying, or excusing. It is simply an act within ourselves to make a choice not to allow negative feelings to crowd out our positive feelings, not to allow ourselves get swallowed up by bitterness and vengeance. And it comes simply by accepting what is this moment in the present, making peace with the no, giving space for the next moment. See, we have the power to choose to embark on this journey of forgiveness with us, the journey of personal growth. It's one where we are no longer defined by the hurt or harm or derision or anything else that we have suffered. It's one where we choose for ourselves to embrace peace, hope for the future, and gratitude and joy right now in the present. It's one where we decide not to remain captive to old hurts, to old fears. The Bhagavad Gita says, if you want to see brave, look at those who can return love for hatred. If you want to see heroic, look for those who can forgive. And so at the end of the day, we have to forgive so that we can reclaim our essential nature. And our essential nature is the undying capacity for love, for compassion, for loving kindness. It means that we, no matter what happens to us, the undying love, which is the essence of who we are, is and can and is untouched by anything that has happened to us. And that is our choice. Returning and reclaiming our essential nature. That's the work of forgiveness. And it's hard work, but it's there. And no one ever, no matter how much power you thought they once wielded over you, no one has the power to take away your choice to forgive and your essential nature, which is undying love.
Karen, thank you so much for those words, for those thoughts, for things that give us something to work on and work towards.